Hello, church. I wish you a blessed Holy Week. We are coming on the most important week of the church year, and the story of the week that is truly, it's not too much to say, the most important week in the history of all creation. It is the story, of course, of things that we know so well, of a triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem, people placing so much hope in him, just as we put so much hope in what or who will save and make all the difference. But then it becomes a story of disappointment, of betrayal, of how we turn away from love, how we let other people down. Even the best of Jesus' disciples denied Jesus and was crushed by how he failed to live up to the person he would have wanted to be. We look at Jesus and we see that for all appearances he has failed, that the cross was Rome's great big exclamation point, saying that we have power over everyone, and here this person is put in the most powerless place. And so Jesus endures oppression, Jesus endures suffering. And don't we know that we are seeing the most awful images and hearing the most terrible stories of oppression and suffering coming out of Ukraine? And don't we know that this is just the latest chapter in the world's long history of that sort of thing? And so, on the one hand, this week on the surface tells the sad tale that is there in our world and is there in a smaller way in each of our lives. But deep within this story, in ways that pretty much no one knew at the time, God was at work. God was sowing seeds of life into the world at every single moment, because Jesus was God's great big seed of life, who in his death was planted in the ground and who rose up from the grave by the grace of God, God entering our oppression, God entering our suffering, God enduring it all and raising Jesus from it, as the great big promise that God's life is bigger than any defeat we might experience. God's life is so much more important than what the world might call success or failure. God's life is in the thick of the world, and God is working out a purpose that a lot of the times we just don't see, whether it's in a situation like Ukraine, or if it's in a situation that's a lot closer to home and we're just slogging through something and wondering what the kind of light or fruit might come of it. The death and resurrection of Jesus says that life has the last word, and God can enter into any situation and bend it toward a good purpose that our eyes might have trouble seeing at the time, but by faith we can claim, because God raised Jesus from the dead. And what Paul had to say about this was that because of Jesus' resurrection, there is absolutely nothing in life or in death or in all creation that will ever be able to separate us from God's love. So Holy Week helps us to see our lives from a different frame, not to deny anything that's going on in them, but to trust that the God who raised Jesus from the dead, out of love, is somehow sowing seeds of love into our lives and what's going on in them just as they are. So I encourage you to embrace Holy Week to the full. We'll begin with a palm branch procession on this Sunday, and then move into a Maundy Thursday service, celebrating communion and remembering how Jesus washed his disciples' feet. And then Good Friday, have a service that enters into the Passion, Jesus going to the cross and suffering and dying for us. And then, of course, Easter Day, a celebration that will begin with a 7 a.m. prayer service outdoors, weather permitting, and then our 10:30 a.m. celebration that will include brass and a celebration choir, and the joyful feast of the victory of God, the Lord's Supper. So let's embrace this way of discovering how it is that God loves us. God shares relationships with us. God serves us from the heart of Christ. And that's why we seek to be a church like that, loving God, sharing relationships, and serving others from the heart of Christ. A blessed Holy Week to you all, church.